I'm very glad to have you here, Melissa, in the series of podcasts that we are running from Wisdom. And Wisdom is the organization, it's a nonprofit organization where I'm the executive director of, and its Wisdom stands for Women in Science Demonstrating Outstanding Merits. We formed that a few years ago because we have seen that there are some obstacles in the way of the career path of young women here in the USA, and we want to help to smoothen the path. And it's great to talk to you, Melissa. We know each other for a few years, and I followed your career path, at least in certain stages. And we have some history together and not together, because we worked with certain products at different times in different parts of the globe, because I'm also from the laboratory industry. And I would like to hear more from that. And you did really a very impressive career over the years, and you changed a little bit the functions sometimes. And tell us a little bit about that, as well as the challenges that you have seen being a woman in science, obviously.
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks for having me, Dirk. It's always good to see you. I think I've been following the Wisdom program for quite a while, so I'm glad to be part of it. Sure. So I think briefly, I started in biotech right out of school, right out of undergrad, and had some chances to do some research in industry, some applications, that kind of thing in the lab. And then I was in the lab for about 5 years. And then I was with a biotech that wasn't doing particularly well. And I was probably the last lab person left when the company was kind of not doing so well. So a colleague of mine at the time came to me and said, you know, we're not going to make it. I really think since you talk so much at the bench, you would be great at sales. And I said, I don't want to do that. They call me all the time. Salespeople show up. They try to, I don't want to do that. And she said, no, I really think you should give it a try. So that was in 1997. And I'm still doing it. So I think one of the things was that I could do at the time was take all the things I didn't like so much and not do those things, but then kind of hone my style into the kinds of people I would want to talk to, or the kinds of people who I thought were helpful.
But that's good, I think, to experience various kind of functions and fields that really is so important for every one of us, really, not only to find where you fit best, but also to gather experience which makes you better at what you're currently doing. So before we go back to your studies, I would like to also know, where are you working currently? What is the company that you're currently working for?
Yeah, thanks. So I was very slow about finding a new opportunity. I wanted to make sure it was the right one. And so I was able to join Cytiva. Cytiva was GE Healthcare. And then it's been Cytiva for about a year, and we're also part of Danaher. And one of the things that struck me most about Cytiva was that I have a lot of former colleagues and friends who work for Cytiva. Of them specifically, there was one who's actually on my current team, and he and I worked together years ago. He's my Fisher rep, and now we're colleagues on the same team. And everyone I spoke to who I knew from the past or were former colleagues and just friends who I kind of touched base with about it said, it's great, I'll never leave. This is the last job you'll ever have. And what drew me to Cytiva was not only that I get to talk about filtration again, which I talked about for many years with Sartorius and really liked, but also there's such room for growth.
Yeah, and that you're selling filtration. In the pre-talk, we spoke about that I did the same thing, even the same products at the time when I was working for another company, which was eMerck at the time, which then later became VWR. And exactly the product line that you are selling, I sold in Switzerland at the time. And so therefore, here's some parallel. We are both scientists, and then did the same things and developed our career in various ways. So when you think back at university, how did you even come about to study science? What was the reason why you, as a young woman, decided I would like to go into science? Is there any specific moment in time that sparked your interest?
So for me, it was something that I always wanted to do. There was really, for me, no other, I never thought about doing anything different. So when I was a little girl, people would ask me like, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I would say, oh, I want to be a research scientist. I wasn't even 100% sure what that meant, but that's what I knew I wanted to do. And it was also just an inherent kind of inquisitiveness that I had. I still have. So I was a child in the 70s and then a teenager in the 80s, and things were very different. And to be fair, I wasn't, so I always would ask questions all the time, asking questions. Why do we do this? Why does this happen? What's going on with this? My own little experimentation, whether it was out putting magnets in dirt, or whether it was, just sitting there and observing frogs in the stream that was behind my house. It was always that kind of thing. And I always asked a lot of questions. And at that time, for me personally, I was not surrounded with people who were particularly helpful in that. I was also not really surrounded with people who said, as a girl, you can do anything you want. It was just kind of, this was me. And for the most part, I felt like I annoyed most of my teachers because I was always asking questions and they weren't particularly thrilled with answering them. And so I did most things by myself on my own. I remember when I was a girl, my mother got encyclopedias and I literally read them all. And there was one in particular that had these overlays for anatomy and physiology. And you could, put the
I recall that. Yes,
the circulation over nerves, over organs, and I would just spend so much time looking at that, understanding what different parts of the body did, why, and then reading about all animals and natural life. And my mother would take us to the library in the summertime, and I'd come out with stacks more of books, and I just read things. And then once I read things, I would try them. Some of them were terrible, like putting metal in sockets to see what electricity could really do to you. I did that once. A lot of experimentation on my own. And then once I got to high school, I was able to take some additional science classes. But for me, really, and this is not a dig in anybody, but up to that point, I didn't really have a lot of people saying, oh, this is great, let's nurture this. It was kind of like, she needs to just stop asking questions. I kind of would get this feeling that my teacher was like, oh gosh, here she goes again. It was hard.
So you are a very curious person, which any scientist should be, and I'm also extremely curious. And I'm working here right now at ULabo USA. That's the company for temperature control in the laboratory, a company which also supports wisdom, by the way, a lot. And I will talk a little bit about that later. But we just have for this year the topic of curiosity as a leading theme, because you should be curious as you were as a child and keep on staying curious, because also understanding your customer and your customer's needs and all of these things as well. So yeah, being a very curious person, I was as well. It really sounds like my own childhood, what you are talking about, doing all these experiments with frogs and earthworms and mosquitoes and all these lovely creatures. I did all of that as well. And here might be then already the first gender difference, because you said you were not encouraged going ahead, whereas I was definitely encouraged by my parents. That was very early on in my childhood that this became clear, whereas in your surrounding and your environment, it was different. So it was then more difficult to break out of this path. So did you have any role models which inspired you to do this step, or was it TV series about research or science? I don't know, because these are also very influential things, aren't they?
They are. So I used to watch science shows on TV. Of course, then back then I had you had like 5 channels to choose from. So I was always watching public television, and watching a lot of science shows on TV. I started following, so really the person who I looked up to in terms of science was Jane Goodall. And I talk about this a lot because I have every book she's ever written. Mm-hmm. How I was always fascinated by how she took her career from basically as a secretary, right, to being the leading voice and brain on chimpanzee behavior. And that to me was amazing. And so whatever show was on about her, whatever books I could read about her, I did. And later on, I had the experience of working with gorillas at Franklin Park Zoo in Boston.
Wow.
And could kind of put that into that kind of observation.
So, but we could say then that Jane Goodall was kind of a role model for you and very inspiring, because I recall at the time there were not a lot of females doing this kind of research, because we had these other behavioral scientists like Konrad Lorenz, Timo Tinbergen, and Irenaeus Eibelsfeld at the same time, and they were all male. And then she stood out already, and doing this primate research, I also was always intrigued, because that tells us so much about us, doesn't it? And that was also what she was intrigued by. Because if you understand chimpanzees and gorillas, you learn a lot about us humans. I totally get it. And so obviously that was very driving and inspiring for you. So we need role models. So therefore it's good to have you on this podcast, because, or videocast, because you are a role model for young undergrads as well, because how you then transitioned into the career that you did. And that's the idea of this video cast, to make other people also being inspired by you. So that's great to hear.
I hope so. I mean, I think the turning point for me, like I said, growing up with kind of no one really wanting to nurture anything except just be quiet, stop asking, was college. So I went to Simmons College, which is now Simmons University in Boston, and it was an all-women's college. And I was there. We graduated, I think, 10 women in biology my year. So you're sitting at your classes are at basically what looks like a dining room table with a handful of women and your professor.
Wow.
And so for me, that almost one-on-one interaction was just critical. And we were so, we have, most of our professors were women, incredibly educated, incredibly brilliant minds who would take the time to sit there and talk to someone like me about the whys and the hows and the whats. And for the first time for me, it was really this someone who was willing to answer all of this, or and guide me in the direction of more of this, rather than just kind of stop asking. And so those years for me was when I really came out of my shell. Up to that point, I was painfully shy, never really spoke. It was like, oh, she's just that weird, smart girl. I was never popular in high school. I was just read all the time. But so then I got to this experience at Simmons where I was with people like me and people different from me, but everyone with me was on a similar journey. We were all super inquisitive. We all were, we helped each other, and it was all about learning more and more and more and more. And the more you wanted to learn, the more the professors and everyone around you was eager to help you learn more. So that was such an amazing environment. And I really can't say enough about my education there. I had some really miserable failures, but I think you learn a lot more from your
Absolutely.
failure than your success. And really how to, kind of see myself through and try to figure out what it was that I wanted to do with all of this. And I think I wanted to be a primatologist, but then realized that I had a lot of student loans, and being a primatologist wasn't really going to pay them back. So I got the
and then you went to the laboratory then, as you said, you were on the bench before. So
I went to the bench.
In university, or?
I had a job at Sepracor, and then was BioSepra.
So you immediately transitioned. That's a point here for us as Wisdom. You immediately transitioned from academia then into industry.
Right into industry.
Was that a difficult transition? Because I hear a lot that a lot of people are not aware of how is life in industry compared to academia. Also, professors are not encouraging sometimes their students to do that because it's so unknown. So you just did this, jumped right into it.
I did.
So how was that experience, the change from academia to industry? Was that a difficult one, an easy one for you? How would you describe that?
Yeah, it was, for me, it wasn't that hard. I worked, I was really only working with maybe one or two people and doing applications. That's where I started doing chromatography. That's really when my chromatography career started. I was able to, I was in the applications lab. I was doing all these protein applications, antibody applications, learning a lot of, because I had never, maybe I did TLC in college, but nothing, you took spinach and separated out the orange, right? It was like
just to explain TLC for our listeners, that's not tender love and care. That's really thin layer chromatography.
Yes, So I started I did that kind of thing in academia, but then was able to parlay that into separations on a column and doing HPLC stuff. It was the second one. I went to Epic Therapeutics, which was after BioSepra, which was more like an academic feel. So we had our founder, who was a scientist, and he would walk up and down in the lab. He would walk up and down the aisles, and he'd be like scratching his head, like this very stereotypical professor, science guy, right? And he'd just be scratching his head, walking up and down, pacing, and then say, Melissa, stop what you're doing, do this. Say, okay. And so the beauty of it was that in doing that, and his mind was always going from one thing to the next, and it wasn't so much about product development. Ultimately, that didn't bode well for the company, but it wasn't so much about product development as it was about these ideas that he had, and stop what you're doing and go do this thing instead. So it started out as chromatography separations, but parlayed into ELISAs and radiation work and immunology and all these other types of things. So I was able to I wasn't just focusing on one thing because of the way he was. You could do a lot of different kinds of things.
That's very exciting to hear, because I think that's what a lot of students are afraid of when they leave university, go into private industry. They're afraid of that this is, as is, of course, is profit driven and money driven, that this is a niche, what you are doing there as a scientist. They are afraid of doing routine work in the lab. And that's what somehow is often told even in academia, that you have more freedom in academia. But what you are telling me is very interesting, and that your passion comes through in your eyes. I really love that how diverse it could be in industry, and that challenges and tasks change on a daily basis, and that's not boring at all. And I see that, and I hear that from you. That's I think encouraging, very much so.
It was fun, and it also gave me a lot of really useful experience in different kinds of testing and different kinds of experimentation, and why do I do colorimetric assays, and why do I do column separations, and then when can I use radiation, and then I was inoculating rabbits. It was all like these different kinds of things at once, and I was really, really grateful for the experience, because when I left, I went into sales, and I could talk to people about what they were
Yes.
doing in a real way. So, you know, even though my first started my sales career in HPLC and ion chromatography, you're still in the lab with people, you're still talking to people. And I think it's a benefit when I look at someone whom I haven't met before and I say, tell me what you're working on.
Yeah, you have an understanding.
And you have an understanding, and you can talk about pitfalls, and you can talk about, oh my gosh, did you ever have to do this? Or have you ever tried this? And in getting all of that experience, I believe it just really helped me in my sales career later on to this, and even to this day.
Very good. So when you made the step into industry, and also later when you transitioned in industry from the lab work to sales, did you have any kind of mentors? Is that something that you would recommend to look out for? Because that's something we as Wisdom are keen to provide as help.
So no.
Yeah, you didn't.
And I didn't. I had colleagues, but not really a mentorship. And I think that one of the things, and it was something that I was desperate for. And it was definitely one of the things that would have been really helpful. And so I was, you know, I was navigating all of this by myself, and it would have been great to have the experience of having a mentor, especially seeing a woman in upper management. That was something I didn't see until much later in my career.
Yeah.
So I wasn't even entirely sure that that was a possibility. And it wasn't really until probably Sartorius that I really, there were women in middle, as I went along, women in kind of middle management, but not executive. And so it would have been great to have someone who I knew, who I could talk to, and help me kind of, you know, steer the ship a little bit more, maybe with more of an endpoint in mind, or potential endpoint in mind, but I didn't.
Could have streamlined the career path probably with less waste in time, which is the same for me. I also didn't have a mentor, therefore I'm so much passionate about it, because if I would have known at the time what I know now, then I would have done things probably differently. But nobody told me. I, as you, experimented my way on my own, how to go forward, and that would be so helpful. And not seeing a lot of women in executive positions, I think, is really an issue, and we see that still in a lot of companies. I think that would be very helpful to have these kind of role models in companies as well.
I agree. And also to give people an idea of, if you study science, you don't have to be in a lab for the rest of your life.
Yes.
There are so many other things that you can do. And years ago, I had the experience of visiting a customer in academia, and I was taught, she was in the physics department, physics professor, and we just started chatting. And she said to me, you know, I feel like universities and colleges should have people like you come in and talk to them about, well, I'm not sure I want to get a science degree because I'm not sure I want to be in a lab forever. And she said, we should really have these workshops and have people come in who are in industry and say, well, I have a science degree, but I'm not in the lab. I sell things, or I'm in marketing, or I'm in product management or product development. Or there's so many things that one can do with a degree in science that maybe, you know, you just think a little farther beyond, but you don't know what you don't know, right? So you don't.
Absolutely.
You need someone to come in and say, oh my gosh, you know, you could do all of these things.
Yes, that's something I believe in as well. Going into colleges and universities, talking to the students and showing them the plethora of opportunities that are out there for women and male people as well, of course, but specifically also talking about this for female students. I think that's so helpful and talking to them as a female or even as a male as I am, because we have sometimes a little bit a different angle, and that helps them as well to see that also other people trust in them. I think that's what they are most afraid about, that they feel so insecure, nobody trusts me, and to show this, I think is very helpful. So so we do this, but if you would be also part of that, that would be great. Whenever there's a need to send you somewhere to talk to students, I think that would be great, because your story is so inspiring, really.
I would be happy to do it, because I think that would also encourage more specifically young women into a science degree. You know,
Exactly.
if it's something that you think would be cool, but you think I'll never get a job, or I won't get the job that I think that I want, there's so much opportunity.
Yes, and we need this. We need this as a society, honestly. And this is not just lip service. I think we honestly need this diversity in science, in research, because how can these great ideas come about if not by various people having different angles to look into certain problems and solve them? Finally, if it's only one type of person, we always will get the same kind of thinking, which doesn't probably help to solve issues quickly and rapidly. In the pre-talk, Melissa, you also mentioned you had also some not so nice experiences in your career being a female. And yeah, I don't know, do you want to share something with us, what you can experience and perhaps what we can do about it today?
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of it really centered around when I chose to have children. So and I, at the time, there were some colleagues and managers in my orbit at the time who were very against it. So they were not, well, you're going to ruin your career. Like, your career's over now. You know, those kinds of things. Like, you can't have both. You have to choose one or the other. And then some people saying, well, what are you doing here? You know, shouldn't you be home with your children? And it, for me, and as a mother, you're already struggling with that. That's already a struggle, right? It's already it already weighs on you to have a career that you care about, and also children that you've just brought into the world. So that struggle is inherent, I think, and it's already there. So to have then colleagues and managers who reinforce that kind of negativity, it, you know, then I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But I don't have the means. I don't have, you know, not only do I do this because I care about my career, but I also do this because I need to care for myself and my family. So I'm not independently wealthy, and I haven't won the lottery. So because of those things, I have to work.
Yes.
And I also think that if I didn't have to, I probably would be anyway. But I think I might, if money was no object, I'd still be in schools. Oh, except I think I would, except I would, in addition to the biology part of it, I would probably also study medieval to Renaissance history. But that's another thing. So I think that once you, for me, once I started really surrounding myself with people and managers who were more encouraging, you know, I've had the experience of, this is a terrible story. I had my middle son. It was I had just come back from maternity leave, like just come back. And my manager at the time said, you must be at this conference. And I thought, oh, it's not how I wanted to transition back, but fine. And so I was lucky enough to have the conference near my mother, and she was able to take my 12-week-old infant and watch him for me while I was on the floor of the convention center. And again, this was my first day back from maternity leave. I walk on the floor of the conference center and my manager looks at me and says, "How long is it going to take you to get back to your original weight?"
What?
And I ignored it. And then, I was like, okay, well, this is the brass tacks I've now been reduced to, right? So okay, so here we are.
Yeah.
We're starting at the bottom. And so I said, well, that's another discussion it's not your business in any way. Yes. Let me know I'm here to talk to customers. I'm here to do my job. I'm going to do my job. And I had said also, I am nursing. And so every 2 hours, I need about 15 to 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, then later on that day, some of the men I was working with came to the manager and said, this isn't fair. She can't be taking these breaks. This is preferential treatment. I'm a smoker and I'm not allowed to smoke, but she's allowed to take a break every 2 hours. And so my manager came to me and said, "This is what people are saying." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm fairly certain I'm protected by the law." And he said, "Well, you can't go to lunch then. You're going to have to give up your lunch. So it's either going to be one or the other. You can either go to lunch or you can do this pumping thing." And I said, "Well, there's no choice. I'm doing the pumping thing." Just no kind of
no empathy, and that's really none. That's shocking, and that's really, I'm speechless.
Zero.
Seriously.
Zero empathy.
Yeah, so that's not how you should lead. We as leaders, I think, should show flexibility also, like we show flexibility also right now in this pandemic situation. I think also at these instances we have to, and these are the leaders who inspire you and bring out the greatest in you, and also for the company finally. So I think you also had a good example of somebody really taking care of the family. So, and that's a common friend of both of us, by the way. So yeah, please talk about this.
So in very sharp contrast, years later, now I've got 4 children and I'm at Sartorius, and I was doing quite a bit of traveling at the time, and I was reporting to our mutual friend Ryan Titmus. And I love to tell this story because it's really a sharp contrast to the story I just told, which was just terrible. My youngest son, I was about to get on leave for the airport. I had maybe an hour or so and I was going to leave for the airport to go on a business trip to Sartorius. And my youngest son comes in with my other sons, and everyone's covered in blood because my youngest son had hit his face. There's blood everywhere. I didn't know if his nose was broken or if he had some kind of other injury. If for context, this kid to this day, if you just touch his nose, it gushes blood. So it was one of those things where I don't know what's going on. Oh my gosh, everyone's freaking out. So I called. I didn't know if I was going to go on the trip or not. I wasn't sure that this was a particularly good idea. I just didn't know what to do. Yes. So I called Ryan, and I said, "Well, the Quinn's like there's blood everywhere, and I don't know if his nose is broken. I'm supposed to go do these filtration seminars and wherever with." And he said, "All right, first of all, is he okay?" And I said, "I think he's okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, the next thing I'm going to say to you is family first. Go sort it out. If you can't go to do the filtration seminar, we'll reschedule it. Go sort that out and just let someone know." And so I said, "Okay, fine." And it gave me it gave me he was giving me some guidance there as my manager, right? So I didn't feel like I was letting a bunch of people down, or I wasn't doing my job properly, or I had my priorities messed up, right? So he's reinforcing all the family stuff. And then it gave me the leeway to make a good decision. where I felt like I could make a good decision, where I could assess the child. Okay, it's not, his nose isn't broken, it's a bloody nose, it's a mess, and he's crying, but let's get this sorted. And the end of the story was I did go on the trip. I did manage to leave, not because I felt like I was under an obligation, or I felt that if I didn't go, these consequences may happen.
Yeah.
I went because I was given the space to sort out
Decide. Yes.
this other thing,
yes.
and make a decision based on that. So because he was able, and that really still to this day, I think speaks to him as a manager and a person, but because I had that kind of positive reinforcement and that direction, it made the decision easier, and I could go not feeling terrible, like I was a bad mother or I was an awful person. I could go and do my job knowing that I was able to sort this other family thing out first and get that situated. And then that enabled me to do my job better because I didn't get on a plane out of obligation.
And you have to be, probably you were much more motivated than ever before to work for this manager and for the company. And that's such a great story, really. And it's in stark contrast to the other story that you told about being a mother. And I can only say from personal experience here, also within the company Ulavo USA, we have quite a few mothers here, and for a reason, because not to discriminate non-mothers, but if somebody can manage the job as well as the family and juggles all these balls every day, usually they are very good, I wouldn't say better, but very good at taking the right decisions quickly and prioritize better than others. So therefore, I think that speaks a lot for having female people in leading positions. And we are testament to that here as a company.
And that's great. And you know, you can't, you know, back in the day when I was first kind of coming into this career, it was one of those things that you were discouraged from discussing. Don't talk about your kids at work.
Yeah.
You know, don't talk about that. Don't tell people that. You know, you want to, if you're going to have a child, you got to get back in as quickly as possible. And because you felt this pressure that there were other people who weren't reproducing, maybe, or there were other people who, well, if you're going to have children, then you're not going to do this to your fullest potential, and that's just not true.
Absolutely not. And just to share this on this video cast, I think also encourages other females, hopefully other managers as well, who listen to that, how we see things today and how positive this can be seen and how this drives the company forward. And I see that really as I said, on a daily basis. And of course, the family values are important to be inspiring for us as an individual and to be motivated. Not to go too much longer, but I think these values are so important, to have values, and that's also what you have and have shown in this video cast. And we want to help as Wisdom really to instill this culture even more. We want to help undergrad students really to find their place, to really find mentors like you, for example, and myself and others, and really help with making their career path smoother, quicker, more according to their desire and their dreams. And everybody should dream big, as you did when you were seeing Jane Goodall. And I would encourage everybody, if they're interested, to follow Wisdom, our website, which is womenin.science. On LinkedIn, it's Women in Science Demonstrating Outstanding Merits. And on Instagram, it's women_in_science. You will see more videocasts like that, other opportunities for internships and other things that we're going to share to really make the life easier for a scientist, being a young female scientist, to really bring you to the place that you deserve, I would say. And it was a great pleasure talking to you, Melissa. I wish you and your family all the best. And thank you so much. Goodbye.
My pleasure. Bye.